o'clock, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Can I get someone to make a motion to review and accept the agenda,
Recording in
please?
progress.
Sorry. It's okay. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All of those that approve the agenda?
I have a motion that, I don't know if it's the appropriate time to insert it now or later on in the meeting. It's about spending, but it's not the same pot of money as the budget.
So, exactly what is it about?
I want to spend some ESSER money.
Well, ESSER money isn't spent at the OVU board, it's spent at the RNESU board.
Okay, I'm going to have to amend it to the budget, when we get to the budget discussion then. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So, all of those in favor of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Communications with parents, citizens, and staff. We did have one board Let's Talk because they wanted to know what day school started again. I saw that you responded. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to the board? Okay, then we'll move on. Consent agenda. Can I get someone to make a motion, please?
Oh, I'd like to pull the 21st.
I'd make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Okay, and what did you want to pull?
The minutes from the last meeting, I think it was the 21st.
Okay, you want to pull minutes, all right. Anything else? Can I get a second to Derek's motion to accept?
Second.
Okay.
Who said second?
Me again.
Greg, it was Greg, sorry. All right.
I'll just keep saying it.
So, other than minutes, all of those that are in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes. Minutes. In order to start, can I get someone to make a motion? Kevin, since you want to talk about them, do you
Sure,
have a motion?
I move to accept the minutes with clarification.
Okay, is there a second? Thank you.
And let's see.
Question. Which minutes are we talking about?
The minutes that are on the consent agenda, which...
There's several
Oh, there are
meetings.
several
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah,
Which
no,
one?
it's the latest one. The
21st, I think, wasn't it?
December 21st.
Those are the ones you want to clarify, but
Yes.
we're making the motion to do all three minutes at the same time.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
So I just lost my page here. Where are we? 1207. Excuse me a second.
No worries.
All right, so page 2 of 5 on the 12/21/22. It's not here right now. We're at, where are we? Maybe it isn't 2 of 5.
What's it in regards to? Maybe we
In
can...
the equity audit discussion, Brett asked a question about the books.
It's the third paragraph.
Yeah, okay, 2 of 5. If there are titles of the books from the grant that can be shared, Susanna White advised there are 75 books and 21 titles. I don't know what that means.
As I recall, there are 75 books that are part of this particular grant. I'm not sure about the 21 titles because I thought none had been identified yet.
They haven't.
Okay, so that should not be there.
I wonder if, I think what it means, well, I know what it means, I think that's what the meeting minutes mean. So there's 75 book choices on the table that have been nominated. 21 titles will be chosen altogether, so 3 books per grade level, K to 6.
Okay, no, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I understood it that Brett was asking that if we could see a list of those 75, the titles of those 75 books.
That was what I was asking, and I guess I thought we were going to see that.
Oh,
but
there you
I'm late, don't worry
I
about
knew
it.
he was behind you. I was waiting for you to figure it out.
Yeah.
I was wondering if I should wait too.
So, one board member did email Susanna and she sent the list, so if ever, I can certainly email the whole list out to all board. I didn't know
Okay.
that was the question. Yeah, she has the full list of books being considered.
Okay, I would like to see it as well.
That's fine.
Okay, so are we, yes? Well, before we do that, can we figure out if we need to amend these minutes and then you can ask your question? Okay. So it should say that there are 75 books and that 21 of them will be identified that will be put into bundles. Would that be correct?
And maybe 75 books, of which 21 titles have been chosen?
Nothing has been chosen yet.
Okay.
Will be.
There,
meaning
21
so
will
be.
be, 21 will, yes, that would be true. They will be chosen, but nothing has been identified yet. That's what they're having that meeting on February 4th, I believe.
I guess I don't know
On a
what
Saturday.
identified means then.
So 75 books have been nominated either by being a medal winner, by teachers' recommendations, by parents' recommendations, by state of Vermont recommendations. So 75 titles have been identified at this point. On the event at February 4th, basically what will happen is everyone who showed up, and there's already been at least one board member who's confirmed to join, folks will have basically a protocol and a process for, here's a way that you can figure out, say that you're reviewing a kindergarten book. Here's a way that you can kind of take a look at, is this a book that you would want to have in the hands of our 5 and 6 year olds? And so each person gets to dig into at least one book and have a conversation. And then all of the results of basically the reviews of those books go back to the curriculum team, who's generally speaking the one who makes decisions about the books that are in our libraries and in our classrooms.
Okay, so what are the 21 books?
So 21 is because the grant allows for 3 books per grade level. So of the 75
Okay,
books
okay.
chosen, they'll say, these 3 are wonderful for kindergarten.
Okay, all right, so there, I guess it would have to move to amend it that 75 books have been nominated for this list, out of which 21 will be chosen.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that okay?
think
I need
that's
someone
good.
to make a second to that.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion regarding that?
Yeah, it's related.
Okay.
I was curious, since I wasn't here, what is the meeting on February 4th?
So that was an email that I believe got sent out to everyone.
And Susanna did share the invite. Yes, we sent an email out to all board members. I can send it again.
Yeah.
Susanna shared the flyer with the Student Advisory Council today as well. It's open to parents, teachers, board members, community, if you're interested in reviewing the books. They got a grant from the state of Vermont. Yep, and I can send it again.
And we can send it again, yes.
Who's they got a grant?
Susanna
The
will,
curriculum department. Sorry. So I can send an email with the book titles and the flyer invitation again to all board members.
yep. And if you want to attend, you just reach out to Susanna White. Okay? Okay, so in reference to the change in the minutes, all of those who agree with the change, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. And then in regards to the other minutes, can we get someone to make a motion quickly just for the December 7th, 2 sets of December 7th
I
meetings?
move to approve those minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the December 7th meetings, both the joint OVUU and the school board minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Minutes have passed. Thank you for that. All right, so we're going to move into governance process at this meeting. Is Brenda joining us at a particular time?
She is in the car right now.
She's in the car.
She's in the car.
Okay. Then we're gonna, is she coming up via Zoom?
No, she's gonna come in person. She thought the agenda she had time.
All right, so then what I'm going to do is pass the review and approve OVU USD budget, because we need her for that, because we need to look at the budget one more time. However, we can discuss our annual meeting presentation and communication plan right now. So, usually, do we have a date set for that? I'm assuming that we do.
Yes.
Our annual meeting is usually
March 1st, I wanna say. The February. March 1st.
So March 1st is our annual meeting, which we hold downstairs in the auditorium. And so at this point, should discuss what we will be presenting to the public and how we are going to get the word out for people to come. Anybody got any ideas? Last year, we had one person attend. maybe we could double that this year.
I have a semi-related question.
Sure.
Last year, there was an issue with ballots getting mailed.
Yep.
Have we resolved that this year?
No. So I can tell you that the same thing is going to happen. So we are not allowed to send out the school ballots with the town ballots. That is not allowed. And so therefore, all of the ballots, I believe, for Brandon and Pittsford are going to be mailed from the town. And so therefore, if you want a school ballot, you will either have to go and vote or you will have to ask for an absentee ballot.
And we can't mail them to everybody?
No, we cannot. Because we did not. Why, there
It's
was a
because in a
reason.
merged district, all towns
all
have to
towns.
agree to the same, and not all of our towns
Right,
wanted to mail.
and 3 of
their
our towns are
ballots.
not mailing. Or 4, actually. Leicester, Sudbury, Whiting, and Goshen. And mainly because 3 of those towns, I'm not sure about Leicester, but the other 3 towns vote from the floor, and they don't mail their ballots. So, we can't do that.
Feels like a problem that needs to be resolved eventually, because it's.
It was a huge problem in Brandon last year because people thought they had voted, and I'm sure the same thing happened in Pittsford, that they thought they had voted for the school when they filled out their town budget and then realized that they hadn't done that.
Can a letter go out with the other ones, basically stating, if you want this one, you're good, you can do this?
No, unfortunately, we can't do that either.
But the
So it-
district could send a letter, couldn't they?
We could remind
The district
people
could
how
write
to
a,
vote.
yeah.
We
Yes, we could do
right?
that. We could send a postcard, we could send a letter,
Mhm.
we could do something like that. That can be part of our communication plan. Absolutely.
With an explanation, can we explain that?
We can just explain again, yep.
We've done things like that in the past. I
Sure.
think.
And at the
Yeah.
school level, we've already talked about ways, putting signs on, again, we can't tell people how to vote, but just reminding them they have to show up, to vote. Putting signs on our school buses, doing the robocalls, sending notice home. There's a lot of ways to get that information out.
Right.
And I think no one anticipated how much of a mess it would have been last year. So I think now we know that it's,
Yeah. But we can definitely do something like that.
The annual meeting.
Yeah.
I seem to recall that we either had to do in-person or Zoom, we couldn't do hybrid.
That's true.
And is that still the case?
No?
this year you can do hybrid. You just, when it's warned, it has to be warned in both formats, with the Zoom link already in the meeting warning.
However, anybody who's on Zoom is a passive participant and
They're a passive
cannot vote.
participant.
They cannot vote if they're invited.
They can ask questions and comments, but they cannot vote.
Right.
I just wonder if we'll get more attendance if we
It's
have a Zoom.
possible. I mean, realistically, what we vote on at our annual meeting is the moderator, the clerk, and the treasurer, and everything else goes to Australian ballot. Very seldom do we vote for anything else while we're at that meeting. So being a passive participant is actually, well, yeah, I mean, unless you really don't like the clerk.
Sam is on.
If it was
is-
all Zoom,
Hmm?
if it was all Zoom, can you vote all Zoom?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so.
No, because the year that it was all Zoom.
Yeah, we could only give
the
information.
3 officers were put on the ballot to vote.
That's right. Yeah. Yep, so as part of our communication plan, we are going to send out a letter or a postcard or something stating that everyone should vote or ask for an absentee ballot, so that that goes out to everyone. Those should go out, when would we normally send those around? The 1st of February?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else?
Should we be using, go ahead,
Oh,
Jen.
no, let Devin talk first and then.
I was just gonna
go
say,
Jen.
should we be using social media to reach out to people and get information? You've got Front Porch Forum, you've got, you know, I don't know what else we use.
Yeah, Sue Gage actually used Front Porch Forum last year to tell everyone that they hadn't voted for the school budget.
Right, I remember that.
So that's another way to reach out to people and explain to them what's going on.
Yep.
And give them I guess the other thing is give them a place to go to get the information that they're gonna want. Unless you wanna put all of the information about the budget on a social media.
Well, we'll put it on our website for sure. We always put the budget on the
Right.
website, and then we can also have our flyer up there or something that, facts about how to get a ballot or something, we could do that.
But that's where everybody gets their information now. They don't read papers, they don't, well, I think actually putting something in the paper is not a bad idea, but
No?
they don't really read papers much anymore. They definitely don't come to these meetings. And I think social media is a place to reach out to people.
Okay. Jen?
This may be a school level communication, but would we be able to use like mass text or like robocalls or anything of that sort?
We are doing robocalls already. Although I think that only goes out to our school community. It does not go out to the wider, it doesn't go out to the wider, public. Thank you.
So
Yeah.
possibly put in your robocall that this is only going out to you. Tell your friends and neighbors, tell grandma that, you know, this is what's happening.
And once the budget is settled, we're doing a Q&A, and Brenda and myself and Marcia are going to all of the schools' faculty meetings to have conversations with them. Last year, a lot of our staff are also residents, and a lot of them didn't vote the first time because they also didn't know that they had to do that. So we also need to do a better job of informing our own staff. By we, I mean me, obviously.
Is there,
Would there be any percentage in lawn signs?
well, didn't the association last year put out signs to vote? I don't know if they still have those. We could ask Mr. Dusty and Ms. King, because they were the ones who did that last year.
I remember seeing them in the Rutland area a lot. I think they were doing the same thing.
I think it would be important, as we get closer, maybe a go on our board out front here.
Oh, that's a great
Ask
idea.
Stephen Keith to put it up there. You know, please remember to vote. Ask for an absentee ballot, something like that. Are there other ways that we can get the word out? Any idea? Especially our soon-to-be 18-year-olds.
I am 18, Lori.
Well, see, there you go. Are you gonna vote?
Can I? I can.
Yes,
I can.
you can.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Well,
As
if
long
you
as you're
register.
I am. I registered last week.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So how could we get to you and make sure that you vote?
To be fair, Lori, I am here.
Well, I know I see that, but you're you know other.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I'd be finding out from my parents. My parents check their emails and stuff
Okay.
and stuff like that. So I'd be finding out from them.
But you also would be looking at social media and things like that if you were.
Yeah. Yeah, but I can't say that I'd be going to the Otter Valley website to check some voting dates or whatever. Like
Right. Makes
you know.
sense. You only go to this school.
What social media would you find out about something like that? You think?
Where I would find out about something like this, Facebook.
Okay.
That's yeah.
Okay. So we should definitely do Facebook. We should
Yeah.
think about doing what are the other ones?
You should
TikTok.
TikTok. There we go. Yeah. I'll do a TikTok. Why not?
Okay.
I know everybody.
Sure.
You know, at least people would laugh. They'd
Yeah.
remember to vote. So, okay. Maybe we can get a TikTok out there. That might be fun. All right, Kristen and I will do a
I was
TikTok
actually
together.
pointing to Brendan about you and not you and I.
Anyway, all right.
Will
Well,
the TikTok have dancing?
yeah,
Yes.
we can do it.
All of you.
So, sometimes you have to do something crazy to make people remember, right?
Yeah.
I'm all about crazy. Okay.
So I'll be an old guy for a second and say that I have a clear memory 20 years ago going to a town meeting at the time, which was also the school meeting. And there was a vigorous 40-minute discussion about whether the schools should spend $10,000 for a climbing wall. And since then, obviously, participation, interest, awareness has declined precipitously, almost to the point of zero. There's partly a national trend in everything. I mean, the pioneering work in sociology that's older than Google pointed this out 25 years ago or so, called Bowling Alone. nobody joins anything anymore was basically could have been the subtitle. And the internet has obviously changed that completely. But I think we also bear some responsibility because our process is so opaque that that people don't understand it and they give up on it. And that's what we can address and should address. You know, sending out announcements on Front Porch Forum is fine. We may go from 1 to 6. That would be fantastic. But we got to change the way we do business that makes it more accessible to the public, I think.
Lori?
Yeah. Yes?
Lori?
Yes?
Oh. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me very well, but I wanted to make sure that people request the absentee ballots, and that, so not only getting out the message that they need to vote, but that if they want to have an absentee ballot mail, that we do that big push early on so that people know they can request them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've already mentioned that, but, and Front Porch Forum is a thing, I know you mentioned that already, but putting that message out early and often would be, I think, very helpful for getting that message across to a lot of people in town.
Yeah, because the longer you wait, more than likely people have already voted. So, okay. Yes. We did talk about that, but yes, we'll make sure that that's on the pamphlet that we send out, whether it's a postcard or a piece of paper. We'll definitely do that. Okay.
Do you have an idea of what it costs to send out a postcard versus a
Brenda
letter
would.
to the district?
Postcards are cheaper, but letters aren't that much more, honestly, or a 1 page.
Right, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. They are cheaper. You know, there's always this balance between first-class mail and using the permit, because when you use the permit, it's lower, but it takes longer because it's not first-class mail. So, you know, I can get you numbers, or
Well, the
I
reason-
can just make it happen.
Okay, the reason I bring it up is the idea of, that was brought up just there, that you want an absentee ballot, you gotta request it, it's gotta come to you, you gotta get it back in time. If
Yeah.
we, so you should, I'm suggesting that you do a couple of postcards. You do one that's gonna get people knowing that they gotta get an absentee ballot in time, and then one after that that's saying, you gotta go vote. Because, I think it's typical advertising, you gotta,
So what are
repeat
you-
often.
Maybe one of the things, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the things we might be able to do is, we still mail the annual reports, and in it, we can have maybe at the back, pull-off postcard where somebody could request a ballot. So like they could pull it off, request a ballot, and drop it off at their town clerks. So we could do like the postcard, like now,
Right.
and then reiterate it again, you know, kind of either on the front cover or back cover, somewhere prominent in the report, because, you know, we like to think everyone reads them page by page, but the reality is we know that they probably don't.
I guess my question to you, all of you, is that when you get your mail, are you more inclined to read a postcard, or are you more inclined to open up a trifold piece of paper, or either?
Postcard.
Okay.
Very little words.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one other idea, this is gonna sound facetious, but it's not. It's bribe people. Give them a coupon to get a pizza if they show. You know, in the 19th century, candidates handed out liquor at the polls, and
Even better.
voting rates were very high.
I'm not sure if
Was that
that's
before they voted or after?
legal. I'm not sure if that's legal.
It's probably not legal anymore.
It's not legal anymore.
What about pizza?
I don't think you can do that, actually. I mean, if we were doing a blood drive, it's one thing, you can offer pizza, but not when you're voting. That would be dabbling in the dark side of,
Persuasion.
Yep.
Yeah.
You could offer pizza at the meeting, then you probably would get 6 instead of 1. And it wouldn't cost you much, because there's only 6 people showing up, and the board.
until they bring their whole family. Ah, free dinner tonight. No.
Just kidding, man.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. All right, so postcard, put a postcard in the annual report. I will also mention it in my letter that I have yet to write, that Melinda's already after me about, that's due on Friday. I will put a blurb in the letter stating that we need that. And maybe the reporter could help us out by putting that in his article.
Well, y'all should actually send us something, and we
Okay.
put it in there. Send us, a graphic, we can make one for you, but, get that to us as soon as possible.
Okay.
The mock-up of the postcard or something.
It might be good to have a letter to the editor.
Mm.
So maybe we can do that too. We'll do a letter to the editor.
It seems like this process is here to stay.
And then that way we can send the letter to the editor to the Addy Indy as well. And maybe the Rutland Herald. Just to cover our bases. Okay?
Laura, who's gonna create all this?
Who's going to create all what? The annual report's already created by...
The postcard, the Instagram, the...
Melinda will help. I will help with writing any letter that needs to be done. I will also make sure that we get the letter to the editor out before the 1st of February, so that people see that. And more than likely, it would be great if all of you, if you're all on Front Porch Forum, would write your own little blurb. Please, get out there and vote. And if we all do it often and put it on Facebook as well, if someone creates something and we can share it amongst that, then I think that we can all make this happen.
Do the schools have Facebook?
Pages, some of them do. Yep.
They all do now.
Okay.
And we have a fabulous tech coach who's helping a lot with communication. He already knows that he'll do a lot with.
So he'll be doing a lot of this? Thank you.
Okay.
Lori,
Yes. Yes.
so I want to reiterate, there are two issues you're trying to publicize. One is get out and vote.
Yep.
And one is request an absentee ballot so that you don't think you voted for the school budget when you didn't. Because
Right.
that was what hurt us last year, as you mentioned. So there's two prongs to this messaging.
Yep.
And it's not just get out and vote.
No,
It's
well,
also request your school absentee ballot. That's the piece you don't want to miss.
right. That is the piece that we have to
People who are voting
explain.
absentee, you don't want them to think they voted for the school budget that they didn't.
Right. That's the piece that we have to explain as far as, please get out and vote, and the only way to do so is to request an absentee ballot or show up at the polls. There's your messaging.
Right,
Short and sweet
but
to
we
the
want
point.
to be clear that they have two paths and spell out those two paths so that it doesn't get to be voting day and we're sending a lot of last minute messaging that people are frustrated or confused by.
Yep. I think we learned a lot from last year, so yes, I think we can do that.
Okay.
Okay?
Lori, I think I missed it before. To clarify, so we cannot mail absentee ballots with the other
Town.
with the town absentee ballots. Can we also not mail them just on their own?
That's right.
Okay.
And the reason for that, it might have not
All
been
the
here, is
towns
that
have
all
to
the
do
towns
that.
have to do that, and we have at least 3 that will not. So.
Do we know, is Brandon and Pittsburgh mailing automatically?
Yes, they are. Brandon, I believe, has voted that all
Forever.
votes from now on forever will be mailed. And I'm not sure about Pittsburgh, maybe they did too, but I don't know. So, okay, so anything else regarding our communication plan for our annual meeting and the get out the vote messaging? Okay?
Could I
Yeah.
say something here? Would it make sense if we're doing multiple postcards to have one initially go out saying, with directions on how to request your absentee ballot? Like make the postcard look like an absentee ballot? wouldn't be one, would be information directions on how to request one?
I don't know that we want to make it look like one because that will confuse people. But yes, we'll have to have, it's going to have to explain how to request one and or that they need to actually go to the polling place and vote.
And can it be an actual request in and of itself?
We were going to do that with the second postcard that was going to go out so that people could request it directly. Okay. Okay. So we're going to back up now, unless anyone has anything else to say. And we're going to do the review and approve OVUU budget and warning. Do you have updated budget information for us?
I do. I updated a slideshow if Kristen wants to pull that right
Okay.
up. I told her it took me kind of pulling it all together. I've been in a hurry up and wait, and the agency kept telling me they're coming, they're coming, they're coming. They didn't come.
Okay.
So there's 2 pieces of information that haven't come, but as they say, we are close enough for government's sake, right? So I feel very confident in the numbers that we have. I made some tweaks from the December 21st, and I told Kristen at the end of the day it changed the budget by $3. Had I known that,
You wouldn't have done
I
anything.
would not have done that. So I'll just kind of briefly go through it. You're familiar with the timeline. Now's the time where you're ready to adopt or reconsider things. I want to remind you what the consumer price index is. This is unprecedented. We've been seeing, below, people always think 3%. We've been well below 3%, but the last 2 years have been considerably above 3%. And the current budget, the current CPI increase that is tied to Social Security benefits is increasing by 8.7%. We take a look at our class size policy. This just kind of tells you what it is, and I'm just going to flip through these. I'm going to kind of focus on the yellow. Everything else is not changed. So this slide isn't changed. Kind of overall, what we're looking at for Lothrop had an elementary 1-to-15 ratio. Otter Creek is a 1-to-15 as well, and Neshby is 1-to-18. When you do it fresh, it doesn't matter if Kristen's on the same slide as you. You just remember them. Go ahead, Kristen. Thank you. Otter Valley can't count quite that way. So just to let you know, this is a good summary of what the changes are. And the yellow are kind of from first draft to second and third. And remember, there's $3 difference between second and third. So we are reducing one position, classroom teacher at Lothrop, due to enrollment. We are increasing a paraeducator position at Neshby due to student needs, and adding 10 hours of support to their library. Again, they're our biggest elementary school based on need. OCA is, you'll recall that we're taking some high-cost students for next year, by definition, are costing more than $65,000. That's a term in statute for extraordinary costs. And moving them to the Rutland Northeast centralized budget. So these are non-special ed students that still have extraordinary costs. So OCA is moving placement. Otter Valley Union Middle and High School is adding one teacher. Ideally would be an English language arts social studies dual certification, but maybe one or the other, and then creatively Michael will schedule accordingly. They are also adding intervention specialists based on student needs. We have not received the final vocational education numbers, but they're not going to be off by more than a few, probably 30% of a student, because it's a 6-semester average. I have gone through the reports and calculated it manually, and I have called both Stafford and Hannaford to get their, Stafford's is set, theirs is nice and comfortable. Hannaford is still in the process, but I feel pretty confident. Overall, the vocational education line from this year to last year went up almost 10%, exactly. We are adding, I couldn't think of a more creative term at Otter Valley, but a pre-late run. And so this is to allow students who may stay after for additional work, but not the actual late run that goes out at 5:30 after practice, 4:30 after practices. So we go out instead of at 2:30, at 3:30, and then another one at the regular late run. Following the same timeline, so there's one north, one south. It's drop-offs, not door-to-door, and it's Monday through Thursday, no Fridays.
And I can't read that. Is there a cost up there for that? You know the cost?
I did know the cost. I can look up the cost, which would probably be better because I'm kind of going from memory.
Okay.
I'm thinking it's close to $11,000. We also had an Otter Valley student that was a 504 student that was pulled out of this budget and shifted to the centralized budget. And then we did have a Otter Valley science teacher who's retiring, notified that they were retiring, and is eligible for a $7,200 sick leave buyout. I did not, in replacing that position, because A, there is a tight labor market, and B, science and math are always really difficult, I did not adjust the salary placement, because it's very likely we could be ending up with another senior teacher. We put in $100,000 to support OVY, truancy, social work, school safety issues. I think Kristen talked a lot about that at the last meeting. And then we updated the assessments. So to remind you, the Rutland Northeast Central Office cost, which include, Kristen's superintendent, curriculum, business office, but also all special education, all technology costs, and all transportation costs, K through 12, are going up 10.71%. That includes moving the extraordinary students from Barstow and Otter Valley into that budget. The cost of moving those extraordinary students was 3.05%. So kind of apples and apples, the Rutland Northeast budget went up 7.66%. But overall it was 10.71. So that's kind of the size of the Otter Valley pie, or the Rutland Northeast pie, if you will. And then it's shared between Otter Valley and Barstow based on the number of equalized pupils. And your equalized pupils didn't go down as much as theirs, so you actually bought a little bit more of that pie. So your assessments went up 12.08%. Just to remind you, we're still maintaining primary class sizes, smaller primary class sizes. We've included salaries and benefits per contract, including the contract that you ratified in late December. We always do line-by-line adjustments by looking at history for things that are really non-personnel, specifically repairs and maintenance, fuel, utilities, and make adjustments based on history and known CPI changes. So we know electricity is going to go up. We've already seen significant increases in fuel. We all have seen that. Of course, now it's dipped back down, but it was high when I built the budget. Just to remind you, health insurance is now determined at the state level through a arbitration, a health commission, and all of our employees have the same benefit depending on whether you are a licensed staff or a non-licensed staff. All employees pay 20% of their health insurance. They select the plan they want based on whether they're single, a two-person, a parent, child, or a family. It does include domestic partners, and then we pay 80%. We also fund an HRA because these are high deductible plans. And again, it's funded according to the arbitration. Those numbers changed from last year to this year only a little bit, $200 less for licensed employees, and non-licensed employees stayed the same. So for non-licensed employees, the high deductible plan has a deductible of $2,500 for single and $5,000, both plans, for whether you're licensed or non-licensed, have a deductible of $2,500 for a single, $5,000 for all other plans. We fund an HRA for licensed employees at $1,900, and at 4,000, and for non-licensed at 21 and 42. And we expect the premium is going to go up 12.7%. So these are just kind of, okay, you know, a lot of this, but let's put it into context and what they might mean. So we know now that our budget and our tax rate is dependent on our per pupil spending, and our per pupil spending is determined by this equalized pupil. Equalized pupil, I think I've explained before, is a calculation of students that weighs students differently dependent on their needs. And so it's important to understand what our equalized pupils are. I work very closely with our school secretaries, our registrar, and our IT staff to really monitor that number because it's so much is counting on it. It is also a 2-year average. So last year, or the year we're in, we had 1,272.7 OV equalized pupils. The draft that we received on December, I think, 20th was 1,258.24. We have not received an updated draft. It actually changed by 5 students from one to the next. I do expect an updated draft. It will change a little bit and it will only affect the actual tax rate. It doesn't need to hold you up from moving on that. So that is a decline of about 16.8 students. That makes perfect and logical sense. If you'll recall back in December when we looked at the class sizes by school, we did see that we had a high dropout and a high loss of students at Otter Valley. I think it was around 30. This is a 2-year average, so 16 makes perfect sense. Education spending per equalized pupil. So this draft that is $3 different than the draft we talked about a couple of weeks ago has our education spending per equalized pupil of $18,629. It's important to know that the state, when they published their December 1st letter, when the tax commissioner shared that, I think you all have a copy of that, they estimate what the state average is going to be to calculate the yield and make a recommendation, and they estimate that the state average would be $20,155. So our proposed spending is 8% below the state average. You would expect that, right? Some are going to be over, some are going to be under. That's the definition of an average. The next two are linked to the top two, right? So your homestead rate is completely dependent on the number of kids you have and how much you spend per student. So currently this year it's $1.27, and proposed in this draft is $1.20. You may remember that we talked a lot about the unprecedented increase in the yield. So the yield went up from $13,311 to $15,479. And so what that means is that increase in the yield of approximately $2,000 buys us $2,000 per equalized pupil of spending more this year than it did last year for the same tax rate. So that's the good news, right? I told you about the double-edged sword. I don't want you to be surprised when I show you the next slides. So that's the good news. We expected that. We also are expecting that our common level of appraisals are going to go down. And our common level of appraisals is, so this is our equalized rate. This will show, this is the only thing you can control. And you can control that by controlling the budget above. I guess I'm not moving fast. Kristen wants me to keep going. So another number that I always think is important is what is 1 cent on the tax rate based on this information. And so in the current year, and it's always linked to that yield, right? So in the current year, 1 cent on the tax rate is just under 170,000. This proposed year, based on the commissioner's announced yield of 15,479, is just under 195,000. So to add or subtract 1 penny on the tax rate, that's what you're looking at. And then just to remind you, you can stay there, Kristen, to remind you what's 1% of the budget. 227,000. I'm really trying to talk fast. I'm like running out of breath. So yeah, keep going, please. Go one more. So this current one is 6.45. All right, so this one I'm going to spend just a little bit more time talking about. I don't know why.
It's the same information.
It's the same information. One of the things that's important that will show up on the warning is that top line. What's the total budget? That's what the voters authorize us to spend. Then we subtract from it local revenues. We'll spend a minute talking about local revenues. We talked a little bit about the Ely Fund last meeting, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. That $735,734,198 right there in the second column of local revenues includes nothing from the Ely Fund. So that's kind of worst case scenario, if you will. And again, it's going to come down to that $1.20. Go to the next slide. This is that double-edged sword. And so that's where we can control it, and where we get different from school to school or from town to town is based on town-to-town CLAs. And so I'll just talk about Brandon, the first line. Right now, Brandon's common level appraisal this year is 93.03. So that means a house sold for $100,000 in Brandon, that was the sale price, and it was listed on the grand list for $93,000. So what it is now is listed for $84,000. So the prices are going up. We expected this, and the local grand list can't keep up with that anyways, especially in light of where we've been for the last 3 years. This is, I think I warned you, so this didn't surprise me, but this has an effect on individuals' tax rates, because for everything we're underappraised on, they can't adjust the value of the house, so they adjust the tax rate to get the right amount of taxes. So in Brandon, it should have left it up there, but if you look in the middle column, the tax rate was $1.20, maybe $1.21, because I think it was $1.27, $1.207. When you adjust it for the common level of appraisal and the fact that it's 15% underappraised, they're going to pay $1.43. Last year, they were also underappraised by 7%. They paid $1.35. So Brandon would be looking at a 6 cent or 4.13% tax increase for their homestead owners. Are there any questions on that?
Can you say the last sentence again?
So this is only residential homestead owners.
Right.
Commercial rates are set at a flat rate that have no bearing on spending, on education spending. They're set by the legislature. They too are adjusted by common level of appraisal. So this is also the worst case scenario. So remember, there is also income sensitivity built into Act 68, where people pay the lesser of either my home value times the tax rate, or my income times the maximum percentage, which is less than a little bit over 2%. So this is kind of that worst case scenario. So in this case, again, I'm going to stick with one line because it's easier, so I'm going to stick with Brandon. So Brandon's looking at a 6 cent increase. If I did my math correctly, that's $60 per $100,000 of a house. And that's for people who are not protected by income sensitivity. Income sensitivity applies on average for sorry, I'm so used to employees, for households earning less than $90,000. It's not that clean because it depends on your house value too, right? So if you earn less than $90,000, but you live in a very, you get the benefit of the lowest.
It's actually 107 now.
It's 107 now. So are there any questions on that? This is the hardest thing to explain to people.
Go ahead.
Brian, I don't have a question on that, but I do have a question on the revenue. The previous slide you were talking about the fact that we're at 24 million, et cetera, and that there's $734,000 in revenue. Then on the next slide, you have a $699,000 revenue. Where's the?
Can you go to the next slide?
I think it's on the next slide.
We're going the wrong way?
Yeah, one more.
Right there. Now, am I looking at that correctly, the far right-hand side? 600 and,
That's the difference. You want to look at this number?
that's the revenue we have, this is 734.
That's included in the budget, right? So that's the local revenue or revenue that we do not have to raise taxes to cover. And that's what it makes up. So let's keep going down this column if everyone is with me. So we start with the money that we get from the Burdett Fund to cover the biomass project at Lothrop. That's $87,000. We rent out the Blue House also at Lothrop. It's based on CPI, so that's an estimate because it's based on CPI as of, I think it's April, and I don't know that number yet. So 17,000. The highlighted big goose egg, we're going to have a conversation about that, but right now it's not anything, no draw from the Ely Fund. Then we have pre-K tuition. So these are students that come into our district from other districts, and they bring their universal pre-K dollars of $37.94 with them. We have 2 students coming into the Caverly program and 9 students coming into the Whiting program. These are current 3-year-olds that we anticipate will come back next year as 4-year-olds. Next is the $200,000. That was the fund balance. We had a conversation about that when we closed the books. The $140,000 is the high school students. So we have about 5 students from from Barstow, 2 students from Rutland High School, and I think 1 student from Rochester. The others are smaller amounts just based on history, how much we get for receipts for theater performances, athletic performances, interest earnings, because sometimes we're flush in cash and sometimes we are not. And every year we end up having purchase orders that come in cheaper than we had anticipated. And that's really what our prior year refund is. It's hard to estimate that number. Last year it was high because we had a lot more purchase orders out at the end of the year. Continuing down, same thing with driver's education reimbursement. That is based on a formula by the Agency of Education. We will fill in the education spending grant after we determine what our total budget is. We are guaranteed, because of Act 46, what was formerly called the Small Schools Grant of $198,000. That exists until they take it out of statute. We also get a little bit of money for the adult without a diploma who goes to a tech center. So they're considered a non-enrolled vocational student. That's just a best estimate based on history. We get a little bit of money for forest lands in Goshen and Brandon. Payment in lieu of taxes of about $7,000. That all totals the $735,000. Let's to the next. So
I just wanted to ask about some of the grants. So further down, there are grants that we've gotten in the past that we're not getting now.
Right. Those were one-off grants. I never count on grants, especially when they're that small, because I'm not sure that we would apply for them, not sure if we would get them.
Brenda, Barbara, did you have a question? No? Okay, your hand was...
My hand raised.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure. All right. Sorry. Continue, please.
So the Ely Fund. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. We do have a policy that says how much we can take from the Ely Fund. And we have kind of a switch. We can do one or the other. So we can either, and this is the language, we can either always take 3 to 5%. We can choose a percentage between 3 and 5 of the value of the fund as of December 31st. That's one option we can do. The other option is we can choose to take the net revenue or the realized gains from the fund. And if we have realized losses, we can choose to take that too, which would mean we would choose to take nothing. So if you go to the next slide. So to kind of give you some context again, the policy was written Hindsight tells me I should have picked a different date, but it was written as of December 31st. Obviously, I don't know those numbers yet. Those reports haven't been out yet. So as of November 30th, the Schwab account had $809,000. The Wilmington Trust, which we used to consider the corpus of the account, that was held in People's Bank, and you remember we just went through probate court to have that released and combined. We're hoping that happened before the close of the calendar year, but I don't think it did. That was as of September. I only get quarterly statements, so that's 120. So the best of our knowledge right now, we have $930,000 in assets in the ALE fund. We could take 3 to 5% of that, or we can take a look at what our net income versus our net losses are. And we do have a net loss of about $3,000. So it is, you know, I seek your guidance on your pleasure. I would recommend you not take anything this year. I would recommend that you let it bounce back and hope that it continues to grow more. I can't predict if it bounced back in the December. You know, the November statement was right after the election. Lori's telling me no, it didn't, so I trust
I've looked at other people's Decembers, it's awful.
It's not good. So keep thinking about that, we'll keep going. So these are the slides that we've talked about before. Again, from draft 1 to draft 2, there was a change of about $74,000. Draft 2 to draft 3, there was a change of $3, which is kind of embarrassing to me. I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about it. This is just different ways to look at the budget. So the total budget, it's a big budget, right? So it's good to kind of look at it from different angles about where we put our investments and where we do our spending. So this is by department, if you will. So where do we put most of our monies? And of the 6.46% budget increase, how much is going to each of those departments? And so, as I think you would be happy and like, most of it's going into direct instruction and student support services. So 3.13 and the 1.03. So 4.16% of that 6% is going directly to student services and programs. And then this is kind of, okay, so what do we buy? Not where do we spend it, but what do we buy? Well, we buy salaries and we buy benefits, purchase services, fuel, electricity, all of those things. And again, same concept, same amount of money, same increase of $1.4 million, same 6.46% increase. The majority of it goes into salaries and benefits. If you look at those two together, benefits went down a little bit just based on who we are currently employing and what plans they are on. And the other largest increase was assessment tuitions. So that's central office assessments as well as the vocational tuitions. So those are the two biggest drivers, both of which are also heavily employee funded. And then the last one is, just where are the funds going, site by site. And so you'll recall that Lothrop is essentially flat, and you'll remember that we did and are reducing one teaching position based on class sizes and enrollments. Neshabie is going up about 1%. That is the school that is bursting at its bubbles and seeing increases in enrollment. Otter Valley Middle High School is going up about 2%, and then OCA is pretty flat. And then district-wide is going up about 3%. And that's because district-wide is where all of the assessments are housed. So central office assessment, special education, transportation are all in that district-wide. And so district-wide, services all districts kind of equally, if you will.
Greg?
Can you go back 2 slides? One more, right there. Is this what's going to be published in the report we send out for people to read about in the
That's what's been published in the past, including some graphs.
I think I remember this last year being confused by the wording of assessments tuition, which you just explained a little bit about. But, you know, if this is all the information that people are seeing, obviously salaries is pretty, people know what that means.
Right.
And just trying to be as transparent as possible since it is such a big number. Like, is there any more explanation we could have for people so we want to delve into that just so they're...
Could we put below that, you know, what each one actually includes? You know, salaries means, you know, personnel, benefits, you know, just kind of like a little.
Description?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't thinking we had to for all, but sure, I guess. It's just that one is such a... It's just not as obvious what it is.
If you're gonna do it for one, you should do it for
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah, no,
I think,
that's fine.
But yeah, it would make sense. I think it would help people understand.
I just want to be as transparent as possible so people aren't like, what is that? Oh, that's something I don't understand, so now I don't trust it. You know, I just want people to understand that we're, you know.
Well, purchase services is hard.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's why.
You think you're buying more people,
Yep.
you know, and it's not.
Right. So purchase services is everything from it could be people, could be
Okay.
mental
Well,
health
sure.
services, right? That would be a purchase service. It could be some professional development. We bring in people to provide professional development. But it could also be the person who services our boiler on a contract. You know, that type of thing is a purchase.
Yeah, I think I guess you're right, having all of them be more clarified is more helpful, even if it takes up a full page, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean-
separate
Like a
of this, like
glossary.
explanations
Yeah, like a
of all of
glossary.
it, you know.
I think that would be helpful to everyone.
Greg, would you be interested in a further breakdown? That, for instance, that one of the reasons salaries are going up is because we,
Well, I mean,
we're
you know,
rewarding the
I mean,
paras
sure,
and
there
bus
may be
drivers.
some people that want a further breakdown. I don't know. I just wanted this to be, if we're going to present that, I just wanted it to be something you could understand. Like, whatever we present, I just want it to be understandable. But, I mean, you could keep going further and further with that. But you're right. I mean,
the concern is that people are going to say, look at this fat cat increase in
no, I
salaries.
think, I mean, I hope that by showing, was the first page where you show, is it CPI, am I remembering? I mean, if we could correlate that again to why salaries are going up and everything else, sure. I mean, we could have another reminder, since it is such a unique last 2 years, it might be helpful to reiterate that again in this context, sure.
These are things people could ask if they came to the meeting, too.
Yeah.
What?
But a
They'd
lot
rather
of
talk
people,
about it if I
a lot of people do read these reports that come in the mail, that physical thing. I know people do read them.
Well, those terms are universal, so there is a
Yeah.
benefit to, you know, having descriptions to it, right? Like, it may be wrong for us to assume people understand salaries means anyone who works for us. So that is from the superintendent to the substitute who came in one day and worked for 1 hour. That's included in salaries. You know, benefits is everything, including our payroll tax benefits that are not sort of benefits that you will tap into. So that includes, you know, the obvious of health insurance, dental insurance, all of those things, but it also includes unemployment and workers' comp and, you know, those required mandatory benefits that we have to apply. So I think there is a benefit to not assuming people understand.
Again, though, I, for me personally, the assessments, tuition and travel being more clarified, and maybe that's just me, but.
Right, because you know what, travel is probably,
I mean, I don't want to spend as much time on salaries, because I think not to assume everybody knows what that is. But of all the ones there, that should be, with repairs and maintenance might be the most obvious. I don't know.
All right, Devin?
It's a big number, too.
Yeah, so Brendan, I'm looking at this sheet, I don't even know where I got it, but we have tuitions, travel, and communications for Otter Valley Union School District. Is that the same as assessments? So now it's named two different things in paperwork that we're receiving. I think what you just said in a nice little letter that you could refer people back to as they're looking at these charts saying, you know, include a
Descriptors, yeah.
an information descriptor of it, because you're exactly right. You see salaries and you're like, oh my God, and our benefits is the one. You see that and you think, yeah, that's a lot, but as you said, it's not just the dental and
Right.
health. It's
Right, so I kind of was looking
employment.
at it today, and I'm like, so benefits are 40% of salary,
Right.
right? There was a time, benefits used to be closer to 20% of salaries.
But they're a big, and that's a big number. I mean, the district-wide is a big number, increase.
So
in
the differences
travel.
in names is because you're relying on a human doing it?
Right. Well, that's why we're here talking about it too, so we can get it all kind of in one
Yeah.
alignment, so that when it goes out to the public, they see it and say, okay, that makes sense, because we're the public. And I was gonna ask that question tonight of what is travel, tuition, and communication? Well, it's obviously assessment and travel and.
And travel is like $1,500 in that
Right.
number.
Jeez.
Right, like it doesn't even deserve
Yeah,
to be
so
in the
why
title.
Why is that in there? Exactly.
Yeah, and I don't make up these categories. These are dictated by the handbook too, dictated by the Agency of Education, both the federal and then the state kind of flow through. But you're right, like travel is worthless to talk about because it's so small in there. That big fat number is your assessments and your vocational tuition.
Other questions for Brenda?
Are we gonna go
Jeremy?
to the next
Oh.
stuff after this, or,
What do you mean next stuff?
well, like where it breaks down by school?
Oh, the slide, the
Maybe.
next slide?
But let,
Okay.
let Jeremy ask.
Brenda, I'm a little confused on one part here. So you brought up the state ed spending grant,
Yeah,
and you don't have the number for this year. But looking back at the previous years, it's like roughly $21 million.
yeah.
Our budget is $24 million we're proposing. That seems like that covers almost the whole budget. How?
Does. So our property taxes go to that line.
Okay.
So we do not have local property taxes. I mean, it feels that way because we all write our checks to our local town clerks and our towns collect them. But they, in theory, go to the ed fund and then the ed fund sends us back what we need based on our budget and what we are not raising through ed fund money. So what we raise locally.
Okay.
After their assessments and travel have been taken out.
I think they get like a 0.5%, right?
So, Brett, what was your question again?
Well, so when we go to like the breakdown by schools,
Yep.
I was curious if we could kind of go down through and explain, I mean, some of the stuff I understand, salaries are what they are, right? Some of that's obvious, but things like, for example, supplies and materials, how do we figure out what that number is?
It's a really good question. So I'm going to kind of back up a little bit and talk about our budgeting process because that's part of it. And so Kristen and myself meet with the local principals and we talk about, we start from the most expensive down to the smallest. So we talk about staff, salaries and benefits. Do you know of anyone who's getting married and might change health insurance? Do you know of anyone who might have a child? You know, do you know of anyone who might be retiring? Are you looking for, here's your class sizes. Do these still seem reasonable? Do we need to make adjustments? So we kind of spend a lot of time on that because that is where all of our costs are, as you can see. And then we kind of go down. So then we start talking the next biggest costs are facilities. And they can be our surprises, right? Are there certain things in the facility that we need to make sure we address that are not sort of improvements, right? So that are kind of normal operations. And then we look at all of those. And then the last thing we really look at is supplies. And we try to be equitable in supplies. Equitable is not always equal. And it doesn't always mean that it's not equal, right? So it's equitable. And equitable looks at things like poverty, looks at things like, economies of scale, as well as certain programs, especially at the high school, that actually really do need a lot more supplies just because they use a lot of consumables, whether it's a science program or family and consumer sciences or fuel in driver's ed, you know, those type of consumables that they're using all the time that don't exist in elementary schools. And that's pretty much how we really evaluate supplies. And in doing that, we also look at sort of history. So this is what we've been spending. Does this feel good? Are we finding that? And this year we went into it expecting to increase supplies because cost of living, we've all felt it, right? We're all seeing that increase. So we weighed that in as well.
So I guess the reason why I'm asking, and you know, maybe there's more to it. So looking at all the schools, it seems like supplies are going up with the exception of Lothrop. And it looks like student count is going to go up next year. I realize teacher count's going down by 1. That's probably because of stuff that should have been different this year. But supplies was going down, and I was trying to figure out what, and then I went down this rabbit hole trying to figure out how you calculated the number, and I couldn't come up with anything that worked, so that was what kind of made me want to ask the question, because I couldn't figure out how, if projected student count is supposed to go up, everything, the cost of everything has gone up.
Lothrop's projected student count isn't going up.
According to this, it is.
You want to flip back to Lothrop's? Well, budget to budget, it's pretty much the same. So in the current year budget that you're always comparing to, we had planned on 163 kids.
Yeah.
Next year, we're expecting 165.
Okay. So that's up.
It is up 2 students, yes, yes. It's down this year.
Yeah.
And we are monitoring that Lothrop has, you know, they have 2 class sizes, 3 class sizes that are actually on the very small end of our class size policy, some even violating it, going under.
And a lot of it, as you alluded to, has to do with the reduction in teacher. That's a significant difference
Well,
in
I get that,
supplies.
but it's not a reduction in students.
Right.
So I'm struggling to figure out why you would need less supplies if you have the same amount of students.
Well, so on the slide that showed the school's cost, that isn't supplies, that's the total school's cost.
No, right, but it breaks it down by supplies and materials. That was the one I got hung up on.
Well,
And I went down a
supplies
rabbit
not
hole.
by school.
And then I was trying to figure out if there was some sort of cross multiplication between students and teachers
Oh.
to figure out like the number. Couldn't figure it out. It was totally not equal no matter what I did. But
Right, but there are also, so like as Brenda said, one of the things that we also really look at is programming, right? So there are some programs and some curricula that we mandate or tell all schools to do, and then there are some that like individual schools do. And even within this, a principal has the flexibility and the authority to advocate for what they need and to move some things around. And if there was ever, for instance, a supply need, a curricular need, they would always go to our director of curriculum, to our business manager. But a lot of it has to do with a reduction in staff, which is just straight up teacher materials that aren't required. Like a lot of that isn't about papers and pencils as much as it is, right? Every time we have a teacher, we have 2 or 3 teacher textbooks for that class, and we have, so it's kind of a little bit more. So it's about equalizing what we generally anticipate being the cost to supply a classroom of students, and we break it down. Here's what pre-K is, K to 2, 3 to 6, right? Because just like the state recognizes different students, different grade levels cost different things, we do as well.
Other questions about the budget? Yep.
The travel, tuition, and communication is the assessment. Each school gets charged that for the assessment.
No,
So the line item on this sheet doesn't mean anything?
So I think you're looking at it site by site.
Yes.
And so when you're looking at it site by site, and you're the only one that really has, so the biggest assessments go into the end. If you look at the end of that, there is a site for district-wide. That's where all of the assessments go. If you look at that line for the schools, you see the most of it, or the next biggest amount, about 800,000, is in Otter Valley only, and that's the vocational cost, Stafford and Hanover. And then if you see it in any of the other schools, that's the travel.
That's the travel, that's what, the transportation?
No, that's like when a principal goes to a meeting.
Okay. So I guess I'm still a little confused because you're looking at, if I'm looking at,
And phone
if
services.
I'm looking at Lothrop, well, they're negative. If I'm looking at Neshabie and their, cost is 13,000.
Yeah.
And
So
so that's just,
travel, phone,
okay.
internet,
And then,
radios,
okay. And then Otter Valley is more expensive because they have.
because they have
more
$800,000 of vocational education. And then if you go way to the end, that's where the biggest amount of money is.
And that is at the
Millions.
Otter Valley District, that's district-wide.
That's district-wide.
That's the RNESU assessment.
That's the assessments. So we don't take the assessments and arbitrarily push them into each of the districts.
Okay,
You know,
because as I added them up, it didn't add up to what the district was.
In Otter Valleys?
Yeah, if I'm adding it doesn't matter. I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so, other questions? Yes, Kevin?
This is a question for everyone, not for Brenda. I think experience teaches us that when Stephen publishes his story, there'll be one number that people focus on. And I'm going to pick one out of a hat and say $18,000 per student. That's outrageous. And no matter how much you go around and say, well, you know, Burlington, they're spending 22 or something, it's not going to matter. Is there any information, number maybe, that to put on that postcard that's going out that we want to convey and get ahead of that other number that some people are going to focus on?
So I want to add, that's a really good question. And I want to add that if you looked at the warning, it's also on the warning. So on the warning, that 18,000 number is there too.
I just picked that one as.
But it is, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
And the warning ends up being the ballot.
Yeah, it could be
So-
6.46% that people focus on. You know.
Right, right. But so I think, you're right, I think making sure people understand contextually what that means is something I would love advice and guidance on.
What was the percentage increase last year?
Can you go down a couple of slides, I think,
I think
Kristen?
it was 4.73.
That doesn't help.
Didn't we lose something from
4.78.
last year to this year? What did we?
Oh, what was, what
part
is
of the
your-
That's what
revenue.
the percentage increase was last year.
$260,000
Yeah, the
additional
So
revenue.
the overall, so the 6.46%, last year was 4.81 or 4.18.
It said 4.78 on the next slide.
Okay.
There it
Oh,
is.
there you go.
But didn't we, in last year's, we had that money we put back in,
Mhm.
which probably accounted for
That is
at
some of
least-
it. So last
at
year
least
you
a
had,
percentage of this, 1% maybe?
almost, so last year you had $460,000 of fund balance reserves. This year you have 200. So
And the Ely
260
fund.
you don't have anymore.
And what was the Ely fund amount?
I think if you go a couple, it's 116,
Okay, so you're at 300 and something already.
right?
It's always the danger of when we give money back.
Right?
Well,
It's
right,
we
well-
pay for it
double-edged
later.
sword.
That's why we did the 200 this year,
Yeah.
because otherwise it would have been worse.
Have we had higher increases in recent years?
No. And I think it's important to also look at the CPI in recent years.
Yep.
And I do think we obviously, I think we budget responsibly. And I think when we look at our neighbors and throughout the state, we see that. But I do understand, that's a big number. I've been doing this for a long time. That number used to be $7,000. You know, so that's and long time is 29
Well, that was
years.
a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time, but
Can you show it graphically instead of a number? Because some people don't, get it, like. 'cause
It's
they
not
just
apples
see
to
it.
apples, though.
But if
no,
they
it's,
just-
and you can only go back to Act 46, you could only go back to 2016, 17.
But if it's just a gradual incline, that makes sense, right?
Well, and I
then
think-
you compare it with CPI, and you see that going up, you know, maybe you can correlate.
Superimpose.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask a question that went right out of my head. Oh,
That was
well.
probably genius too.
They can see that it makes sense that it's going up, because
Everything goes up, and that's the thing, is if as long as it's going up a little bit, you're okay. It's the big bumps. that
So you
hurt.
focus on the percent increase and not the dollar amount, and you could show
Except for
the.
you went up more this year than last year, that kind of, I was hoping.
No,
it would-
but we would
yeah.
still be below the 8.97 graph.
Sure.
So if you go back to that one, it was like way in the beginning, Kristen. So if we kept this graph and put our per pupil, our increase in per pupil spending, education spending per equalized pupil, we would be below it. There might be times when we blip around it, especially with that decline into 2021. But, you know, last year we were at 4.78 and this is 5.9. This year we're proposing 6.46 and this is 8.7. So that's a good idea.
Can you tell me where we are in relation to the stealing cap per, you know, the equalized?
Well, it's been on far away. So
I know,
far away.
I know we've been far away,
And
but I
I've
think
never
that's.
ever really even paid attention to it, and I know, I'm gonna look it up and see if it was announced. I
Okay.
know that there is a moratorium on that, but let me
Okay.
see if we even have, if they even announced a rate this year or not.
I was just curious because there have been times where schools have, or districts have gone above the pupil spending limits and of course
So-
get dinged.
Our neighbors,
Yeah.
where I live. Yes, and so they did announce it, so it's a good question. So even though it is on, you know, pause or suspended or whatever, they did calculate what it is by formula, and it would be 22,204. And so just for new people, what does that mean? So if your education spending per equalized pupil exceeded 22,204, for every dollar you needed, you raised 2. So for that amount over the 22,204, you got double taxed.
You have to send that,
All of it goes to.
all of it.
We've never, in the history
We've
of.
never even gotten close to
We're
it.
always well below other districts.
We
Right.
were before we merged. as
When
an
we were
active
We were
group.
individual,
We were-
especially
but we
the
were
small
close. Some of
schools.
us were close.
Not the high school.
Not the high school,
school.
the elementary
High school
schools
is
were.
always,
But the
way below.
elementary schools were
Elementary schools
scarily
were very close. Yeah.
The small.
the small ones, but the high school, though,
No.
was always well below.
Yeah.
well below. And collectively, we're $4,000 below.
And Krista, do you know among the other schools in the state, how many are increasing students like we are?
Increasing students as a trend, generally Vermont's enrollment is declining.
Right, but ours is not.
I mean,
Neshabie is not.
Neshabie isn't, you know, we see, it, you know, varies by a couple of kids every year. But generally speaking, Vermont is declining, although there are some pockets that are experiencing quite a bit of student move in. They tend to be places that have more centralized services. So some of the cities like Burlington,
Williston,
South
Burlington.
Williston.
Heinsberg.
I guess my point is that if you're gonna increase my taxes, I wanna know what I'm getting for my money. And if the fact is that the state of Vermont is decreasing in student population, but our district is actually increasing or staying level.
I think we're staying
then
level
I'm-
more than we're increasing
Then I'm more
overall.
willing to say, okay, well, I'm paying for that because we have students
What
in our
we
community.
are experiencing, you know, besides the random couple of students here or there is generally a fairly steady number. What we are experiencing are larger than, I mean, this is my 4th year, larger than ever numbers of students, like the extraordinary costs. So we seem to be receiving either state-placed students, families moving in that have students that, you know, the amount that it costs to educate them exceeds what what we would project is a traditional amount. And we do what's best for kids, and that isn't cheap.
Jeremy?
Along the lines of what you said, Devin, something that I've always found frustrating as a taxpayer is that I feel like there's always this focus on spending as little money as possible, and I think part of like something that Greg, you were alluding to before with not understanding the budget, you get that people in the community not understanding the budget, it's just like these numbers and lines that like the words don't even make sense and aren't obvious. I feel like typically we're not told what we're buying, going back to what you said. So the focus is always, look how little money we spend, look how little money we spend, and it's just like lines of numbers showing the smallest percent increase we can possibly get away with. That's the attitude I've felt about it, is that it's like a crime to be spending money in the school system. So I feel like we should focus on what we are spending the money on rather than necessarily focusing on the change, whether up or down in percentages or total dollars. So like what you were just saying, Kristen, I think that's what's important to all of us, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I assume so, is that we're trying to create a budget that educates our students the best we can possibly do it, and this is what it costs. And I feel like that's what we should sell the community, not the focus on we're trying to spend as little money as possible. And based on like all the budget information we've had, I think we are all looking at it, being able to make that decision of, oh, are we like frivolously spending money? From what I can tell, we're not. I think the concern that people have is that in presenting a budget that goes up at all, is that somehow people in the community think we're just like, I don't know, spending money on, we're going to get new gold nameplates for ourselves or something like that, when it's not the case. And so I feel like that's how we present this to the community and take the focus off of spending as little as possible and put the focus on here's what you're getting for your tax dollars and here's what the kids in the community are getting. So like in the postcards and in the meetings, I feel like as a taxpayer myself, that's the thing that I want to know is like, okay, so there's like this huge number and there's a million different line items on it, and what does that mean? And I feel like the focus has always been just on this, sorry, we're spending money. And I feel like the focus should be, this is what it costs to educate our kids the best way we can, and let's focus on that.
I think we should piggyback on that, or the needs of our students are changing too. They're coming out of a pandemic and a crisis, and their mental health issues and social emotional issues that we're having to deal with that we haven't had to in the past, and those are more expensive, which leads to the special services, and those are where increased costs are coming from.
Yeah, I think we had a good, some good insight to that at our last meeting, when there was some presentations about the professional responses to the identified needs that were surfacing. And I don't know how you get that information into a warning or into a budget announcement. It would be more beneficial perhaps with, letters to the editor or some conversational type information, because these kinds of things are hard to digest.
Yeah, and I think that you're explaining this to different cultures. So you have, your boomers who think school is kids just go in and they're doing their math and reading and writing, and then they're out. But that's not what we're doing anymore in schools. There's so much more that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We have resource officers, we have planning rooms, we have, there's just so much that's
professional
changed
development
that they don't know that's happening. They don't know what's going on in schools these days. So I think your younger generation and kids people with students in kindergarten through grade school get it. I don't think that's who we need to reach out to so much as we have to try to get to the older generation to understand the needs of students nowadays.
Yeah, Brenda.
So when we present and publish things in the annual report, we often will change those numbers to pie charts and to line charts. And we often do not focus on the difference and more on the where do our monies go. Our intent is, you know, what do I get for my money, is why we provide you with the class size information, so that you know that, yes, when you have class sizes of 1 to 15, maximum 1 to 18 at the elementary level, you are going to have more costs than you are when you have class sizes in California and other places of 1 to 24, 1 to 28. You know, we don't have class sizes like that. So, you know, definitely any ideas on how to better sort of visualize it, where are the funds going versus where are the increases and changes. So I appreciate looking at it more for what you're getting versus what you're getting different from last year.
Brett?
And maybe there's a reason why we don't do this, because I can see where it would be a bad idea, but, so we get the overall set of numbers. We get the overall set of numbers, right, and then we get it broken down by school. What about a breakdown by town? Have we ever considered doing that? And I'll tell you, here's where I'm
How
going
would
with
we
this,
ever
right?
do that?
So,
Yeah, how would we do that?
well, we know how many students from each town go to Otter Valley, right? So, can't we couldn't figure that out? I feel like we.
Oh, no, we know how many kids are from each town, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Although we do have a decent amount of crossover even at our elementary level
Yeah.
of kids from different towns.
Well,
Right.
so here's why I asked this, right? Because I'm having a real hard time with the fact that, and we could get into the, and you know, I can understand it because I've sat here for all these meetings and paid attention, and I can understand it now, but someone's gonna ask me, why are the taxes in Pittsburgh going up almost 11%? And Lothrop's the only school in the district that's going down on its budget.
Yeah,
So,
that's common level of appraisal. That is 100% the
I
fact
I
that-
understand that, but I'm having a hard time of what I would say to that person, because it doesn't, and I understand there needs to be a reappraisal and all this other stuff, but if we just talk about the numbers, it's tough to justify.
That's a tricky conversation to have with them, explaining the
Right.
level of appraisal and how that factors into your
Which we have no control over.
Right.
None.
So it's, yeah.
So
The
instead
other
of
one that
numbers-
really got hurt was Leicester. To be honest with you, I assumed Leicester was because of the lake. I don't know why Pittsburgh's went down so much. But there must have been enough high sales happening in Pittsburgh to push that up.
If you look at common level of appraisal, almost everybody went down by 10%. Their common level of
Yeah,
appraisal.
and Lothrop and Pittsburgh went closer to 15.
Yeah, Leicester's at 11.
I mean, Leicester and Lothrop and Pittsburgh are the same one.
Well, I think you're onto something, that one of the reasons, I think the major reason that bond issue for the, and that should be Jim, and the changes that Lothrop went down, is that people in Pittsburgh felt like, why should we be paying for Neshabie? And that's a legacy of our previous system, where every town was independent, and people, even though they voted for the changes with Act 46 and voted for a common system, they still think in terms of my local school. I don't have an answer for you.
Barbara?
I just wanted to circle back around to the messaging that Jeremy and Natalie were hitting on, which I think is great. And I wonder if that's something that can come out in the letter that you put in the annual report.
And, yeah, and Kristen should do the same, so we should both hit
Yeah.
home on that pretty well.
The way that Natalie worded it was wonderful, so I don't know.
I guess I'll have to watch the video and.
Maybe Natalie should write it out for you.
Never word it.
Write it.
All right, and then you're gonna,
I'll work off it.
Stephen?
Yeah, so just to jump in here along these lines, I could sit here and, like, I'm sitting here trying to make sense of all this. I'm new to this, I don't have kids in the system, so I've not really had to pay attention to this very much, other than just like signing my checks to the town clerk. You all understand this so much better than I do. I can sit here and try to write this up, it would make so much more sense for you guys to write something and for us to run it. You know, like so much more sense. You have so much more knowledge about this and insight into all of this. I mean, my writing about this would be so superficial. You know, I feel like it would take me a while to play catch up. You know, it would, so, you don't have to make a decision about that right now, but, this is something y'all do need to be thinking about. I think it would make a lot of sense for you to have some kind of letter to the editor, editorial, something like that.
Okay. Sounds like a good student project to start. And then
Really?
we can build off it.
Okay.
Other questions for Brenda at this point? So what I'm going to say now is that I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brenda, but you are not going to get any other new information about this budget that would seriously affect it before next week.
That is a correct statement.
Okay. And so therefore, I would entertain a motion to accept this budget as it stands tonight and do the warning and then not have a meeting next week. But that would all be up to you.
And to be honest with you, because the warning is already filled in with the $3 less budget from December 21st, you can even accept that number if you want.
There you go.
I do have a question about the Ely Fund. What did it start at initially?
Initially,
100
like
years ago.
175,000 years ago,
Yep.
the
I thought he was going to
135,000.
say
135,000, and now we're up to 900 something thousand dollars.
And you were on the board, so you might help me remember. I think it started in maybe the 70s. And then in the 80s, the then Neshabie board took some extra. So it started and it was limited to, it started when mortgage-backed securities were getting, mortgages were like at 17%.
Right.
So Fannie Mae and mortgage-backed securities were getting really high rates of return. And it started to exceed Neshabie's need for accessing those monies. So in the 80s, the then Neshabie board took $100,000 and said, we're going to invest this in a more aggressive manner, but still conservative. And they invested it in large to mid-size stocks. And we have continued with that, and that's how it's gotten to that. And so over the years, it has funded the construction of the Neshabie Library. It has funded, various different things throughout the.
How much is owed on the boiler, the pellet boiler?
You really picked the most obscure questions for me to know the
I guess-
answer to.
Yeah, that's part of the.
I would have to get back to you
Ely
on
Fund has
that.
been paying for that, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it has been up to this point.
That was the plan. Yeah,
I guess
you made that plan, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess my point is that we've got $900,000 sitting on the Ely Fund. Is that going to is there taking some money out of that? It started at $130,000. Is taking some money out of that going to ease our?
So the
budget this
issue
year?
is, based on what we talked, when we had our meeting with the Ely Fund investors
Mhm.
or the management company, is that they felt that it would only, currently at the current rates, that it would only be there for another 6 years if we continue to take money out of it the way we have been. And I don't think that that would be fiscally responsible of us. So, and if we're going to not take money out of the Ely Fund, even though our tax rate is going to go up between 5 and 15 cents, this is probably the year not to take it. Because I think next year we're going to see CPI either, it could continue to go up, but I think you're going to find that it's going to be harder and harder for us to continue to see our expenses continue to rise the way they have been.
Right, we've got the Esser Cliff.
Right, we have the Esser Cliff coming up. We're gonna need that, that's my feeling. And we don't want the Ely Fund to die, because
No,
then,
no.
that's the other piece of it. So I would like to give it a chance to rebound, if it could. But of course, that's up to the rest of you.
A question about the Ely Fund, if I
Sure.
remember from several meetings ago. Can that only be used at Neshabie?
Yes.
Yes.
And so, what's the impact on the budget, the overall budget, having this one line item that's only used at Neshabie?
As far as like,
Well, so it's only used at Neshabie, but then Neshabie's budget influences the whole district budget.
You mean as a revenue item?
Yeah, well, so let's see, Brandon on the proposed budget is going up by like 1%. So
So that's.
if you use the Ely fund to make that level with last year, it would impact the rest of the district's budget, even though it's only being spent on Neshabie. I guess I'm trying to figure out, even though it can only be spent on Neshabie, it's not in a bubble, so like,
no, it helps everybody, but it can only be spent on a Neshabie project.
yeah.
And level funding every year is not fiscally.
All right, I'm not suggesting doing that, I'm just trying to like understand how the Ely fund plays in, how we,
Yeah, now my
how we have to view that in relation to the fact that Neshabie is within a larger district.
Well, I'm sorry I brought it up then, because I thought Ely Fund was allowed to be used by RSU. I thought that was part
No,
of
it's
it
only-
when the consolidation was happening. That was a big argument or discussion, and I thought it would go in. Okay.
No, it's only be
And-
able to, and the
and
same with the
for
Burnett
it-
fund is only for Pittsford.
For Lothrop.
Or
But-
Lothrop.
the whole
Functionally, it still does, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, it still does, and it does allow the district to have a reduced tax rate when those monies are used.
Yeah. Okay.
Part of the reason I'm asking is to, like what you were saying, Brett, to our job as a board to be fiscally responsible, but also to balance the various towns' needs in a consolidated district. And my assumption was that it winds up being a wash, that even if it's just going to Neshabie, it benefits the whole district.
It does.
But if it didn't, then I feel like that's a different decision we have to make.
No, it definitely benefits the whole district. Derek? Are you
I move
making
that
a
we
motion?
accept the language of the draft.
Does someone want to read it so that we actually have it out in public and people can?
Just the Article 8 part of the warning?
Yeah, it's the warning, the money amount.
Tell the voters, I move that we approve the school board to expend $24,174,395, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year.
Right.
And so you're making that motion, Derek?
I am making that motion.
I'll second.
And are you seconding that? All right, is there any discussion, which I hope not, because we've
Time to move to amend.
I'm really worried that's like $3 off, maybe. I don't know if we can.
I'll get rid of the
All right,
$3.
all right.
So you have to go in and when you do the warning, so you adopted the budget, did you?
Not yet,
Oh, sorry,
because-
I'll shut up.
Change the number that I said at the
No.
end.
No, we can leave the $3.
I can get rid, I'll donate $3.
That's right, put it,
Brenda, is that to be raised by taxes?
No, you have to use these words.
Okay.
So the board approves the total budget, the 24,174, whatever that number is.
Right, got it.
yeah.
395, give or take $3.
Yeah.
And that's yay or nay. And then you approve the warning, and in the warning, the article on the back, we have to fill in numbers for you.
Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So, discussion.
Yeah, I have a motion to amend it. I've got it written down. It's long and complex if people want to read it. No, you don't have to. All right. So here's the motion. To add to the fiscal year 2024 OVU budget $200,000 for equipment necessary to 21st century tech ed, such as, but not confined to, programmable CNC routers, laser routers, and metal lathes, advanced 3D printers, and/or necessary and desirable classroom equipment, subject to the recommendations of Roland Fellow, tech ed teacher, Devin Tarpak. This authorization includes any changes that might be necessary for classroom electric power management that may be required to use said equipment, as well as B, whatever additional funds may be necessary for the design and construction of a shop vacuum system which meets industry safety standards.
So that's your amendment. Someone would have to second it.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion regarding the amendment?
I've got a little handout.
I have a question about, just operationally, I thought it's a different budget that comes out of.
Well, that would be true. So if we were to do the amendment that he's suggesting, you would actually be raising the budget by $200,000 and asking people to fund that with local tax dollars instead of our facility fund. Yeah.
So if I remember, we had the, this discussion last year, and he wasn't gonna be here this year, but we had designated something like 140,000 that we.
175.
Or 175 that we would use for this purpose this coming year.
Yeah, I spoke
Did we already approve that, or do we have to still approve?
It'll still need to be approved in May. It's, right now it is.
Is there anything problematic with us approving that?
I don't see anything.
So
I
the only
actually-
problem with
Add to
doing
the
this now is that we're gonna raise it by a cent, because this is essentially a cent.
Well, yes, and I spoke with Devin on Saturday, last week, actually, in regards to this, and his indication to me is that he's not ready for any kind of stuff at this point because he's still doing the legwork to determine what it is that the businesses in this town need for skilled labor that he can teach. And until that happens, which would probably be closer to the end of the year, he's not, he hasn't asked for any of that at this point.
Well, I haven't talked to Derek because school board members aren't allowed to talk directly about budget matters with teachers. And I've been avoiding him to make that, keep him absolutely safe from any concerns about that. When we talked last spring about using money from the facilities budget, Gene Collins said the time wasn't right, and the right time was when we discussed the 2024 budget. So this is the right time. I mean, I don't know how many times we're going to be moving the shells around and saying it's not the right time, it's not the right budget, it's not the right money. I thought ESSER funds would be a great use for this, and bottom half of the page talks about why that's the case. But, we have an undemocratic and unconstitutional school governance system where half of the RNESU board has an incentive to vote against our high school. Until that changes, ESSER funds probably aren't going to be used to help our high school students. So now's the time. So less than 1% of the budget, as we just heard. Every year we graduate seniors without necessary training, without skills necessary for the future. I don't know how long we're going to put this off. We talk about equity a lot in here. I think there's agreement, at least I got the impression last meeting, that the number one equity issue in our district is poverty, and that we know that working class and poor kids take tech ed. And it's time.
Where would you
And
suggest?
finally, I've got the quotation from Mr. Ruppel. I misspelled his name on the sheet. It's a typo. It's Ruppel. And facilities improvements in the tech ed space and across the building. He talked about as a necessary change in Otter Valley. And then, again, this is quoting him, as Devin Karpak engages in his work on the Career Pathways program, we will need technological capacity to support students in exploring and engaging with new career pathways. Now, Devin's Roland Fellowship is this year. He's taking his trip to Germany and wherever else he went, Vegas, I think, to these conventions. I am fully confident that he can come up with a way to spend this money and doesn't need another year to be thinking about it. Justice delayed is justice denied. We're denying our kids who take these classes justice until we commit to start spending money on them, which we haven't done. And I'm not going to bore you again with how antiquated the equipment is down there, 60, 50 years old, covered with duct tape and so forth and so on. I mean, this has been going on a long time. It's time for us to amend it. Thanks.
I have a question. Where would you suggest we remove $200,000 from the budget?
I'm not suggesting, I'm suggesting we add it.
You want to increase the budget even more?
I'm suggesting we add it. I mean, I would love to see this come from ESSER funds, as I said. I have no confidence in the RNSU board to do that.
I'm concerned about a 6.46% increase just alone. And so I'm thinking to myself, what if we have to bring this down to under 6%, right? So my concern is already where we're at, and then now we're adding another $200,000. I mean, I personally would love to have 5 more counselors on staff, and I would love to come to you all and say, my son really needs a one-on-one that he's never had. Can we hire someone for $50,000? I would love to say that. I would love to say my friend's foster kid needs somebody to help him get through day to day. But I can't do that because to me that's a personal thing that I see the school needs. And I hear you that we need equipment, but we have a plan for it.
We don't.
And I want to stick to the plan because I don't think it's equitable for you to come here and ask for this every single time for a small group of kids.
Oh, asking every single time is not an issue. I mean, I have the right to do it. I'm going to do
It's taking
it.
my time away from my family right now.
Well, you know, you're on this board, Natalie. You have to wait till the meetings are over. And as far as the fiscal conservatism goes, we've just talked about how this cliff is coming, how in the next couple of years it's going to be much more difficult. Brett mentioned at the last meeting that we've got money to spend now that we're probably not going to have to in the future. The time is now.
I don't think we have
Barbara,
any money.
no, stop. Barbara?
So there's ways that, there's process.
It took 50 years to process this stuff.
I guess the other thing I would like to add before, this might help you a little bit.
Sure.
Is that when we look at what summer projects, which is where we would probably spend this money, the 175 that we've been talking about, that's in May, which is only 4 months away. And in that next 16-week period, I think Mr. Karpak will have a much clearer idea of what he needs and come to us, or actually he should be coming to his principal and then going to Brenda and to Kristen to say, I think this is what we need. I'm ready to bring it to the board. He needs to have a clear and concise plan. I don't think he's ready for that yet. And I don't think it's right of us to be fiscally unresponsible by saying, here's $200,000 even though you're not ready for it.
So that there is a process, and we've heard a lot of times in this year, I mean, I'm pretty clear on, and I hope the rest of us are clear on, there is a way that communication and requests happen in the district, that it's a process that is pretty generally accepted by the moving parts of the organization, so.
I think we all want to help this program get off the ground and do really, really well.
Right.
But we need to have a plan in place, and that plan is not in place yet.
And, I mean, and I think as Natalie's mentioned, and you've mentioned, and I think it's been mentioned several times over the course of the past time that this request has been made, is that Devin has not come making this request, and he's the teacher. That to me is.
Well, and he wouldn't be coming to us anyway. He'd be going to his principal, and then they would be going to the finance.
He has not been making this specific request.
No.
Where did Mr. Ruppel get the notion that we need to facilities improvements in tech,
Lori,
in the tech end space?
Does he have the floor?
No, he didn't raise his
All right.
hand, so.
I think that there's a procedure that should probably be followed.
I would like to hear from Chris.
So yes, I would say generally speaking, we absolutely are prioritizing longer term things like workforce shortages, alternative pathways, programs like Devon, programs like Musa Lamu. But these things are in phases, and there really are only so many things you can do at each moment in time. Devon has articulated very clearly that he is focused on this work and is thinking longer term about May, about the following year, about what he needs. We intentionally this year, which was new from the last several years, invited all of the principals here in October to sit with the board to talk about what their budget priorities were, what their facilities needs were, what their hopes and dreams are. So it isn't to say that that's not Mr. Ruppel's priority, it's not on Mr. Ruppel's radar, it's not work that he's thinking about doing. That just happens not to be the biggest need at this point, was Devin's shop. And again, there was already this set aside money for Devin to come in May and say, here's what I'm ready for. Here's what I feasibly can take on, like in this upcoming cycle. In the budget, you'll see in OB, we added a workforce, work-based learning person. You'll also see the addition of an intervention specialist. That's actually someone to work with students who are in non-traditional pathways, students who are out in the community, coming back, grabbing credits in non-traditional way. I would actually just hopefully ask that folks respected Mr. Ruppel's ability to come and work with Brenda and myself and advocate for what he was ready for and wanting to prioritize at OB.
Devin?
So Kevin, you're saying $200,000, we already have $175,000 put aside for this, so you're thinking $375,000 is what Devin's gonna need to work with?
Yeah, I think we need to spend more, and, you know, I respect what Kristen says and what we're talking about, but I can't say it enough. This has been underfunded and ignored for 50 years, 60 years really, but I'm giving them 10 years to say, to use the initial equipment, right? The stuff is antiquated. We are teaching kids.
We get that, but I guess what I'm asking is, you think that
Houses in the basement.
he thinks you think he needs $375,000, not
Well,
$200,000?
I think the air handling system is much, much more expensive than he first thought it would be. So the air handling system alone, I think, is going to take up that money personally. I want to see modern, new equipment that our kids are excited about using. And, you know, the only way I know how to do it is to press for it, and the only function this board has is to spend money on it. That's how we show our love. We spend money on the kids. And I'm impatient. I want it to happen. And I've been advocating this stuff now for over a year. It seems like nothing ever happens. There's always more planning. There's always more. It's always the wrong budget. That's why I'm here tonight to talk about it.
No, I just have one. My biggest concern is I heard you say "I" like 5-6 times, and this is not an "I" board. We all have to be in this together for the same thing.
I'd love for us to all be in this together.
And I'm not hearing Devin come to us and say, this is what this shop needs, this is what this school needs, this is what this community needs. Those are the words I want to hear, not I personally want this to happen. And that's what I'm hearing.
I would also indicate, that if we put this money into this budget tonight, it's still not gonna be available until July 1. If we set aside the money from our facilities budget, that will also be available at the same time.
Great.
Is there any, I missed that meeting, I think, with the principals in September, October.
In Leicester.
Is there
Yeah.
any, I mean, my only fear is, does the principal know that the board, because we all care about this issue. Like, could there be a scenario where the principal's like, no, we're not gonna focus on that, and then we never hear about this?
I don't think so.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that this is 100% gonna be on the facilities, and that we can spend money for these things from our facilities, that we're not gonna
You
have
see
any
it in the
problems.
May meeting minutes from last year that it's designated as a number 2. That was a question that was brought up a
Yeah,
couple
I
of
just
months
wanted to
ago.
clarify that again.
But that would become a 1 when we see it in May.
Okay.
And Mr. Ruppel certainly does.
Yeah.
Like, that's important.
He knows that alternate pathways are really important, and I know that he would like to see that happen, but he also knows that Devin isn't quite ready yet,
Yeah.
and he doesn't know what he needs. Kevin?
I remember a ridiculous discussion last year about facilities and whether things needed to be screwed into the floor, and I remember talking about the library tables in Neshby as being bought out of facilities funds. And I clearly remember Gene Collins saying that we were having the wrong discussion, and that we needed to have this discussion again when we discussed the FY '24 budget. That's why I'm reading this tonight. I feel like the ground's been shifted on me before, and I want to be absolutely clear that we're talking about money we are allowed to spend, and again, now's the time. Why not now?
Eric?
Just quickly, I'm sure if you look at the demographic of the dropouts we have in this district, I'm sure they're not the wealthier children. Looking at that, you know, I honestly think, I'm also very passionate about the subject, but I honestly think that if you're elected by your town to come here and represent, then therefore they have, endorsed you to speak on their behalf. Therefore, if you're passionate about something, you ought to be allowed to talk about it, even every meeting if you want to, because that is basically your job as being elected by your town. And I don't think anyone should be criticized for that type of thing. If you got a beef, take it up with the constituents and say, hey, you gotta vote this guy out. Just my 2 cents.
Thanks. Brett, did you have something to say?
I have a few things, and I might forget some of them as we go.
Okay.
I agree with that, right? We're all here for whatever reason that we're here. And I hope we don't get to the point where it's every meeting, but if someone wants to bring something up, they shouldn't be afraid to do so. I think, and I remember exactly what Kevin was saying too, when Gene said now's not the time, because we're not in budget time, so he's right in that sense from what I remember. I think this is a tough one, right? Because we're not going to be in a better position next year, most likely. We have all sorts of positions we have to deal with. We're not in a great position this year. So, I mean, is there something creative that we could come up with, like, could we open the facilities fund for the debt service that should be to help offset this?
Not debt service,
Not
it
debt service.
it has to be on facilities.
But we could
That's why it's
pull
called
from
the facilities.
to do this.
Could do that.
Yes. Which is, I think, what the plan is for May, honestly.
Despite the confusion we had last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you agree with that? There's no confusion this time?
I agree that was set aside for,
Well, has something changed though? Now it's okay to use facilities funds for this?
It's always been okay to use it for facilities funds. I think some of the questions that were raised when Jean was here was specifically about the desks that Mr. Karpak has. They're old, they're falling apart. I always jokingly say to him that he's the wood shop guy, so they should make their desks.
We can screw them to the floor if that helps.
Well, I know, right?
I think that was the equipment that needed to be screwed to the
yeah.
Right, the equipment needs to be screwed to the floor. But we could definitely, if desks are important, then, and they don't want to make them in wood shop, then, we'll buy desks. But realistically, this is a big project for the wood shop, and I think it makes sense to come out of the facilities fund and not, we're already going to be trying to explain to people what our budget is right now, and to say to them, oh, we're adding another 200,000 for something that we can take out of a facilities fund that has at least $750,000 in it, I think that is fiscally unresponsible.
We have $750,000 in our facilities fund?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not remembering this conversation from March. I'm remembering being told no. And I'm here asking for a yes.
Is there any other discussion? So on the amendment of adding $200,000 to the budget, those who agree, please signify by saying aye.
No, are you voting on the motion, on Kevin's motion?
Yes.
The long motion,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So all of those that approve his motion,
Something needs to be done via the people who.
it's only his motion right now.
It's an
That's
amendment.
it's an amendment.
Amendment to
So,
add
and it's been
$200,000 to the
seconded,
budget.
so we are voting on the amendment.
To
Okay?
add $200,000 to the budget.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. All of those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it is defeated.
Can we get an accounting of the names, please, for the vote?
So,
Sure. So those that were for was Kevin, Eric, Brett, and Devin. And those against were Barbara, Natalie, Jeremy, Derek, Lori, Greg, and Jen. I don't know if I didn't see your hand go up or down.
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to vote.
You
I
are.
would vote no, please.
Okay.
No, please.
Thank you. Okay. So, going back to the original motion, which is on the table now, is to approve the budget, 24 million, whatever, blah, blah, blah it is. Is there any discussion regarding that? Hearing none, all of those in favor of approving the budget as we've seen tonight by Brenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hands raised. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Ayes have it. Budget is approved.
What about Jen online?
I saw her.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Okay, now we need to do the warning. What?
Did you need these?
I gotta get the warning.
She has it. Oh, okay.
Just
Thank
from
you for
the
being here.
Musil Moo and
For what?
the Will Be Tech program.
Do you want to unbind? If you want.
So that's coming.
That's, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, the warning is in the packet, I believe, and that's the piece that we need to do next and fill in the
Can you
numbers.
pull up that tax grid again? Because the warning has the top number, the 24,170, whatever, but it doesn't have the next two numbers.
Okay.
Is it this one?
Yes. So I think it's gonna ask, can I come look at the warning with you, Barbara? Yeah. Yeah, I thought, don't worry about it. So this is a per pupil spending of,
18,000 something.
629, so right here, it's 18. And then that is 9.5% higher than the spending.
Okay, so do you want to make the motion and
Can I just read it out? I move
Yeah.
we approve
To-
Article 8. Okay?
which is the
No, you
motion
have to
of the
approve the
warning?
whole warning.
The whole warning, it's the whole thing.
The whole thing,
Yeah.
front and back.
Yeah, but you don't need to read the whole thing, just if you approve the warning with the numbers that you've added to it.
Okay. I move that we approve the warning to the voters of the Otter Valley Unified Union School District. And the budget that will result in spending, in education spending of $18,629 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 9.50% higher than spending for the current year.
Okay. Okay, can I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Natalie. Any discussion regarding the warning?
I just have one question. What was it? 9.5%, and it's a 6.4% increase on our taxes, correct? Where's the 6.4% from?
6.45?
It's actually, so this is why this is a hard, so that language is dictated by statute.
Right?
And that language is intended to let people understand the importance of equalized spending per equalized pupil. So they focus on how much that went up, which is that 9.5%. The overall budget went up 6.46%, and we are projecting a tax rate before common level of appraisal to decrease by 5.81. So pick your number.
Yeah, okay. I just, when, it doesn't
No,
matter.
yeah,
People are
we
gonna
get-
see that, people are gonna see the
Yes.
9%, or they're gonna hear that, and it's gonna be like bedlam, and then you're gonna hear 6.4, what does that mean? And then they're gonna hear, no, it's going down 5%.
But then your taxes are going up because common level of appraisal.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like dominoes.
Yeah,
You can't make this up.
thank you.
And that's done at the legislature, though,
It
that
is.
language that we
It's
have to
required.
now live with. And
Yeah. Any other discussion regarding the warning? Okay, all those in favor of approving the warning, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Okay, warning passes. It is 10 after 8. We have a couple more things on our agenda. Will you approve an extra 20 minutes to go over our meeting to finish?
So moved.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
Second.
You need to leave? That's fine if you have to leave. Okay. Okay,
kids.
sounds good. Thanks, Natalie, for being here. All right, all of those in favor of extending our meeting to 8:30, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. All right, so next thing, review monitoring report compliance for superintendent performance evaluation. So the superintendent performance evaluation is done at the RNESU level. However, it would be helpful if OVUU members would send the RNESU board comments about the superintendent's performance up to date, because we will be giving her her review in February next month.
So are these just kind of general statements, or?
It's general statements. We will do some of the evaluation based on her compliance, or her monitoring reports, which have been in compliance, but it's also important that we have other information to give her, things that she might be able to enhance, things she might be able to whatever, things that she's doing great. Those are just things that we would like, and I didn't want to do it we can't do it in public like this because it is a personnel issue. So I would much rather you just send me your personal comments, and we will incorporate those into our evaluation.
you just want comments.
Yeah,
There's no prompt to this.
No, there's no prompt.
Okay.
I just want you to tell me how you feel she's doing.
I'll write yours.
She's awesome. Wish we had 2 of her.
There you go, that's right.
Just
Okay?
email you directly?
Yes, that would be great. Okay? All right, moving on. Board member recruitment. It was with sad eyes to read today that Devin is not going to be renewing his board appointment. So we definitely do need another Brandon, OVUU at large. So that means it can be anybody from any town. So if you know someone who's interested in being on the board, please let them know. I have not heard from anybody else that they are stepping down at this point.
They have until the 30th of January to have
get their
their
paperwork
petitions
in.
in.
Yes, and if you are going for the OVUU at large, you need 60 names on your ballot, on your petition.
And if that's a write-in, they probably need a lot of write-ins, so a write-in.
You need at least 60. You still need
Yeah,
60.
so we gotta get somebody on the.
Right, and you need to make sure that they're registered voters. There was some issues with that earlier. So,
So how many empty seats are out there at the moment?
currently there's no empty seats. Every seat is currently filled.
Vacancies?
Oh, up for grabs?
Yeah.
Let's see, there's the 4 new people, there's you, who else?
Does the Goshen one have to run again?
Yes, she does, so that's number, so I've got 5 or 6.
Okay.
Okay?
Me too.
Okay, yep. All right, RNESU board update. So all we really did back in December was approve our RNESU budget. And you already saw what that was, the 10.71% increase. And we'll be meeting again in 2 weeks and doing some more stuff. Let's see, review board annual work plan. Some things have been shuffled around. I don't have it in front of me, but we're going to be doing the listen up thing. Are we doing that this January 18th? What are we doing January 18th? Presentation wise.
I do think it could be that. It could be
Okay.
mental health.
Could be.
Something Natalie had talked about.
Okay. So anyway, so we will be doing presentations on January 18th at Lothrop. We are at Lothrop on the 18th. No special board meeting on the 11th, since we've already approved our budget tonight. And so therefore, our board candidate info session is probably going to be moved.
It's not
Maybe
too
not.
much. It's not a whole lot of runway there.
Flexible
Yeah.
pathways and ELLs.
Oh, ELOs and flexible pathways. Oh, that's
And
good.
then listen up, yes.
And listen
sorry.
up, okay. So we probably still will have our board candidate special meeting next week, but we'll do it, can we do it at central office? Or do you wanna do it here? We can do it here.
It doesn't matter.
We'll do it here.
What
All
is
right.
this meeting? Sorry.
It's just for people who are interested in being on the board to come
Oh.
and see us.
Can you get RSVPs ahead of time?
Sure. I know last year we didn't get anybody. It was very sad.
They don't have to do that. That's just,
They don't have
that's
to,
just
but
something
it's
to
just
do.
something, if you're interested, you wanna find out what it's about, it's good to come.
What date is that? Sorry.
Next week, Wednesday, the 11th. Let's
Wait, did
see.
you
Yeah,
confirm our 6 o'clock meeting is canceled?
for next week, yes. Yep.
So what's this candidate meeting?
We do it every year. We do a candidate meeting for any potential candidates who might want to run for the board.
And is that here?
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday at 6?
Wednesday at 5, actually.
Wednesday at 5, okay.
Yep.
Not that I'm going to be sending in.
Okay. But it's, if you know someone, it's always good to go. All right, and then our last piece of the puzzle tonight is our superintendent's informational report. Anything you want to tell us?
I mean, I'll be really quick because it's late, but a couple of folks have asked about PCB testing updates. It hasn't started in any of our school, but OCA is first. Potentially, they could start as early as this month. They tend to give you 6 weeks notice, and we haven't heard yet, so it could happen January to March. And just, important information around that, there definitely have been some school districts that have gotten hit fairly hard as a result of the PCB testing. One of the things that they're finding is a lot of the contamination ends up being in caulking and things around the windows, and they're, in buildings before the 70s. And so I just kind of put in, just for your information, things that the board, because the board will have a hand in then what happens if any of our schools have levels that exceed the action level. And the emergency board approved the use of $2.5 million in funds to be able to support schools and districts that are dealing with this. But at this point, none of the schools that have been impacted have been able to access those funds, which has been really helpful for those schools. But in the 2023 legislative session, so starting in January, that is one of the biggest things on their docket is, okay, so now how do schools ask for help? Like, how do you get that information? So I just gave you a little bit of information about that, and that's all related to Act 178, which is the clean air. And then also very relevant, especially because we're talking about budgeting, is coming into play next year, is Act 127, and I remember hearing Dr. Mathis talk about it for a long time, is the weighting of pupils. So they are changing the way we count equalized pupils, which will have an impact on all of us, right? Because equalized pupils definitely weighs into the budget and how much we spend. And so basically I just give you a little bit of information, just reminding you about how we do the ADM. There's a different amount of money for students in poverty, a different amount of money for students in elementary versus high school, yada, yada, yada. New categories have a differing pupil base. Grade level, long-term membership, so they're looking at it as opposed to every single year, which will help those of us who have declines or enrollment bumps just by a couple of. So it's looking at those grade levels, but it's looking at long-term membership. So what's the, yeah.
I didn't understand what that phrase was.
My yada, yada, yada?
That too, but
You got that.
long-term membership is what confused.
So the long-term membership, they're going to look at grade level. So a pre-K kid costs more to educate in theory than a 6th grade student. That's not true, but I'm just giving you an example. And then they're also looking at you take grade level memberships and then you look at long-term memberships. So if you have Lothrop had one this year, right? So Lothrop had one where they historically have, say, 2 sections of 15 in kindergarten every year. This year they only had 17 altogether. They would have been dinged significantly. We would have been dinged significantly to look at long-term membership. So they'll look at that. We all know that there's years where it's high and it's years where it's low. So in places where we have small schools, this really helps us, right? So like this year when we had to add a teacher in August at Otter Creek because their 5th and 6th grade class jumped hugely, this new weighting would have really, right, like helped us. So they'll look at grade level, but also long-term membership, poverty, free and reduced lunch counts. Most of our schools have a fairly high free and reduced lunch count, so we will do well in that category. Sparsity and population density is a new one, and that is also good for us, right? So in places where you're geographically challenged and strapped for access to services, say Leicester, Sudbury, Whiting, aren't as close to Rutland as Pittsford or Barstow is, so it's harder for them. So they'll also look at sparsity and population density. Districts with small schools, again, we do well in that. And then English language learners. So those are the new weights. They work in concert with one another, so they help to make sure you don't have one really high and one really low. And it will adjust your tax rates accordingly. So all things considered, although like with most things, they pass the legislation before they actually know what the impact is. But at this point, RNESU is poised fairly well with the new weighting designations.
We took
And that
30
starts-
years to figure it out.
I will be retired by the time it's figured out.
So that
for
starts July
sure.
1?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that needs to be discussed? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, goodbye, everyone. Thank you.